This is just one of those messages or podcasts about a podcast. So this is only a minute or two long. I'm sending you this message to alert you to the fact that there's a podcast will go out this weekend, and it's called A Buddhist Prayer. And really and truly, I'm trying to share my life with you. I'm not trying to teach. I'm not trying to teach anything. I get my teachings from Tibetan Buddhism and from the Panchen Rinpoche, the Panchen Lama in Jampeling. And that's where I direct everybody. Go there, learn about Buddhism. But I'm also every so often wanting to share my enthusiasm for faith experience. And a number of people were asking me to continue on talking about the idea of prayer. And I said I would talk about a Buddhist prayer, a very beautiful prayer that the Dalai Lama says every day of his life. And this morning, very early, he was live on telly. I get a feed, I get notifications, and they come on Twitter, and then you link into a live broadcast on YouTube. So I have that linked up with the Dalai Lama office, and so I'm able to know when he's doing a live broadcast. And there he was, and people, singing a praise to Shenredzi, the great Buddha of compassion, and there was the Dalai Lama. And it was very early in the morning, and I was in a hotel here near Dublin, Barbarastown Castle. Very fancy hotel, not me paying for it. I'm doing an RTE programme on the televisions coming up in October. It's an episode of the well-loved series, The Keys to My Life. So I'll be doing that. It'll be going out on the 23rd of October, and we're still only recording it, so I'm busy at that. And they do tend to give you a restful and relaxing hotel when you're working, because it's hard work from 10 in the morning until sometimes 7 at night, film and stuff. So that's why I'm in the fancy hotel, Barbarastown Castle, and loving every minute of it. Woke early this morning, got this notification just on Twitter that, the Dalai Lama is live, and I pressed the button, and there I am lying in the bed thinking, I'd love to do a podcast of that prayer. So I got up and I did it, and I feel that I'm happy doing it, but I just thought I'd put this little preface into it to say, be warned, I'm not a teacher. I'm not a teacher of any religion. And that's not what I'm doing. What I'm doing with you in these podcasts is sharing my enthusiasm for being here now, my enthusiasm for being present to you, and feeling in some sense that you're present to me. The way I do that is share my story. It's a kind of a giving. When you tell your story, you share your story. It's like you're giving of yourself. You're not kind of showing off that you know something. You're not kind of saying like, I'm hugely intelligent, I know all this stuff about, Buddhist philosophy. You're actually kind of just revealing your enthusiasm. That's what I'm doing. And that's a way of finding intimacy with other people, even with strangers, because it's like saying, look, here is who I am, and it invites the other person saying, who are you? And I can't get away from the idea that faith and prayerfulness, I suppose faith and prayerfulness transcend the religious boundaries. So I never feel trapped in the cage of Christianity or trapped in the cage of Buddhism or anything else. I'm learning so much in the past 6 months, as you know, because I do talk about it, but I learn a lot about Islam ideas and Islam ways of prayer. And the way of prayer is like something that transcends all the different religions, and I get an enthusiasm for it. Why? Because, honestly, it helps me live in the present moment in a completely different way. I have never found a way to experience transformation other than this method of using narratives and rituals and embodying faith in some language, whether it be Buddhist or Christian, saying my prayers, if you like. That the words create a new consciousness within me when I embody the words. So I speak the words, I embody the words, and then it's like I become the word, and around me is a new context. The word shapes the cosmos. In the beginning was the word. And now the word is in me and is in you. And that's the way that I use language. And that's the only way that I've ever found transformation in life. That I can kind of transcend the awful little person I am as Michael, the awful little person I am with all my kind of venal appetites and greeds and pride and negativities and bitterness and anger about this, that, and the, all that stuff is just impossible to overcome. And yet, when I use prayer, when I use a mythic language of hope in a mentor deity, be it Christ or Allah or the Buddha, I enter into a new embodiment. And so I enter into a kind of a new cosmos. And so I find myself completely transformed. And that's how I use prayer. And I was enthusing about this in the previous podcast about bewilderment and about prayer, those two, and go back and listen to them if you like. I was enthusing so much about it that somebody said, would you ever please give us that prayer that you keep talking about that the Dalai Lama is always saying? And I thought, I'm so reluctant to do it because I'm not a teacher, but here I am this morning in a hotel, when great solitude you get when you're on your own in a hotel and you're working, you're away from home and you're away from everybody, and you wake at 6 o'clock, and through the magic of Twitter and notifications on my phone, I press a button and I'm actually listening live to the voice in the distance of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And it's like there's a voice saying to me, now is the day to try and share this prayer. And I'll tell you this, I tried to share it and I only got through verse 1. I realized as I was moving through it that the ideas in the prayer are so huge and complex and enormous, and I'm so poor at explaining them that I only got, in an hour, I got through one verse. So, it gives us things to do in the future. There will be other moments where we'll be able to come back to this prayer and meditate on it again, and meditate on the benefits of actually saying the prayer. Because when you say the prayer every day, it reinforces a cosmic perception that is gathered around the words of the prayer. You know, it's like the prayer is like a great jewel, and around it exists in a kind of an environment, a kind of a cloud is around it. And so when you become the prayer, you become the jewel within, and then you're surrounded by a new content. You have become a different person. You are in a different cosmos. And we've only explored one verse of it. So here I am, I'm doing this little introduction to the podcast because I feel it needs it, because I feel I don't want you to think I'm trying to teach you something. I'm not. I'm trying to have a friendship or a relationship with you. I'm trying to share being in the present moment. And my way of doing it is to share with you my confusion, but also my enthusiasm for the wonder and the beauty of prayer. So now I will let you listen to it, and we'll be starting off. It's early morning. You can sometimes hear the very distant and faint voice of His Holiness the Dalai Lama in the distance as he broadcasts publicly from his base in Dharamsala. And thank you for listening. Here we go. I woke about an hour ago because I always listen to the Dalai Lama when he's live. You know, I have one of those things where you follow somebody and then you get notifications on And I got a notification that the Dalai Lama was talking. But he just gets up in the morning and he goes out and he does a blessing. And they broadcast it live, and it can be inspiring for me to start the day like that. And I began thinking that from last week's podcast, I wanted to do a particular prayer. And it's a prayer that's a favourite of the Dalai Lama. He says it every day. And so that's one reason to share it with you. And the other is that it's such a radical expression of non-violence that I find it difficult myself betimes. You see, it's all right to be non-violent when you're in good humour and when you're inflated with your own wonderful life. But it's an entirely different thing when you're feeling annoyed with somebody. And I have to say I was annoyed with somebody during the week because I had an argument with them about something small. Nobody close to me now. Just somebody I knew in kind of professional way. And, a small argument, and I really found myself wanting to defend myself, kind of, it was so absolute, my honour, my dignity. No, you're wrong there now. And that kind of way that we defend ourselves is so, it's so viciously, powerfully strong. It's like my own self is the absolute. It's like you can infringe on my ideas, you can infringe on even my properties, and I'll share things with you, but don't ever tell me who I am. I am who I am. And that it has an absoluteness and certitude to it. And I confess that that's how I felt in this argument. And so I thought it wouldn't be easy to say that prayer at the moment. But that's the very time you need it, because it's like water drops on stone, your heart can be so absolutely like stone and implacable in relation to your identity, who you are, your sense of dignity, and don't ever you dare challenge me. And that's the hardest point at which it is to be a Buddhist. And you can hear the voice of His Holiness the Dalai Lama in the background on the internet, broadcasting to the public live. And just that sense of his presence in the background, it stimulated me this morning to do this podcast without any preparation, but I really felt I wanted to share this with you. So I suppose I'll go to the prayer itself. And as I said, this is a prayer that His Holiness the Dalai Lama says that he recites this every day. And I'm doing this podcast in connection with the previous last week, where I talked about the power of saying things and how we transform our sense of consciousness in the words. Almost like the words come first and we shape a new consciousness around words. So in this one, think about that, the way that the words are spoken. If you speak the words, then they'll create around you, in you, a new consciousness. Which of course is contrary to the consciousness we all have, which is, I am the absolute, I am who I am, and do not attack me, because I am kind of always right, The words of the prayer go like this. With a determination to accomplish the highest welfare of all sentient beings, who surpass even a wish-granting jewel, I will learn to hold them supremely clear. Whenever I associate with others, I will learn to think of myself as the lowest amongst all, and respectfully hold others to be supreme from the very depths of my heart. In all actions I will learn to search into my mind, and as soon as an disturbing emotion arises, endangering myself and others, I will firmly face and avert it. I will learn to cherish ill-natured beings and those oppressed by strong misdeeds and sufferings, as if I had found a precious treasure difficult to find. When others out of jealousy treat me badly, with abuse, slander, and the like, I will learn to take all their loss and offer the victory to them. When the one whom I have benefited with great hope hurts me very badly without reason, I will learn to view that person as an excellent spiritual guide. In short, I will learn to offer to everyone, without exception, all help and happiness directly and indirectly, and respectfully take upon myself all harm and suffering of my mothers. I will learn to keep all those practices undefiled by the stains of the 8 worldly concerns, and by understanding all phenomena as like illusions, be released from the bondage of attachments. Now, it's a challenging prayer, but a beautiful prayer. And there's layers of it that you might not fully grasp. I certainly didn't understand little lines in it until I kind of read up on it a little bit and heard teachings about it. But as you get familiar with it, you actually get inside it, and it gets inside you, and it becomes in itself a ritual. Because, you see, prayer is not just words on a page. Prayer is an embodiment of a disposition. Do you know, in the old days, people would say that they learned a prayer by heart. And if you learn a prayer by heart, if you say a prayer, and you're saying it by heart, well, you're physically kind of embodying the prayer. You know, your mouth is speaking the words, your breath is pushing the words out, your body is balanced as you say the words. And if you say the words in a, let's say, a meditative position where your back is straight and you're calm and you're focused, and maybe you have an icon in front of you, an icon of the Buddha or whatever, or a picture of His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and you say these words, and even if you did a visualization beforehand, like where you visualize other people around you. Now there's a really, really powerful way to meditate within the Buddhist tradition, and that is to visualize around you people who are your friends, your loved ones, your family members. And visualize them, let's say, on one side. And on the other side, visualize people that you don't actually like, people that you're angry with. And then in the third position, maybe perhaps making a circle so there's people to your left, your right, and kind of in front of you. All the strangers in the entire world that you don't know. So you can't say they're friends, you can't say they're enemies, but they're there in the world, all around you. And that kind of visualization of people around you is a wonderful way to keep your meditation from becoming selfish or self-obsessed. Because you're reaching out to these other people, you're praying with these other people, you're stretching yourself in your mind towards people that you dislike and towards people that you love, and you're recognizing one as interchangeable with the other, because your friend of today could be your enemy of tomorrow. And your enemy of today may have been your friend long ago. And if a friend can turn into an enemy, then all enemies can turn into friends. And add to that the hugely wonderful Buddhist idea that in some sense we live forever. There is no death. There is just a kind of a continuum of eternity, of being which is being. And that we are a manifestation within that absolute being. It is time that is relative and contingent. It is space and us that are contingent and passing. But in some sense, that which is the heart of our being is eternal. And linked to that an idea of karma, whereby your actions cause consequences. So that the constant kind of returning to purify your being, to become pure light, to become Buddha, enlightened mind, to become one with the ground of being that is compassion. That's a big idea, and I know that that's just one way of looking at it, but it's a beautiful idea. Indulge yourself in the idea. Even if you don't believe it, just indulge yourself in the idea. And you get this sense of how your life, you've been here before, that in some sense you continue to return and return until you ultimately are completely pure. And then you can begin to wish for that purity, that enlightenment. You can have, the wish for enlightenment in your present heart in this moment, and feel the sense of belief that this will happen, that despite death, despite the sense of fragility that might come with old age or with illness, that in some sense that which is within you is enlightened and is just reaching and reaching in cycles of being, cycles of life, to achieve fullness of being, fullness of compassion. So that when you link that idea to the business of people all around you, friends and enemies, you begin to see the huge potential that perhaps somebody in this lifetime who is an enemy, and who is an enemy to you for the entirety of this lifetime, that person may also have been a friend in a previous lifetime. And could be a friend in a future lifetime, or even in the next moment of your life. So the potential for changing enemies into friends is not limited to one lifetime, and that maybe is the clever trick of that philosophical insight that Buddhists have. That the idea of reincarnation, the idea of karma, is not just a clever idea, but it's a vehicle for your mind to expand, so that you can begin to contemplate compassion as being an infinite possibility. It's not something that is limited to this lifetime or to, the day that is coming before you today. You might think, well, I had a falling out, let's say, with, my ex-wife or my ex-partner, or some, childhood friend, let's say, that I had a terrible, vicious, negative fight with when I was young, but now they're in a different country and I'll never meet them again, so I can never be reconciled with them again. And that would be a limited view of the possibilities of reconciliation. But in terms of Buddhism, if you allow your mind to be stretched by the idea of reincarnation, then you begin to experience a sense of reconciliation as infinitely possible. You may not get to that person in this lifetime, but maybe in the next lifetime you will. Not maybe, but certainly. My teacher always used to say that maybe we will get to enlightenment, but only together. Because our karma is interwoven with the people that we connect with in this lifetime. That's us here now. We, the people who are here in this community called family or friends. And in some sense, it's nice to think that all those people are with you eternally. And that the struggle to find compassion is the one that will grow through the relationships with these people. It's not like a new life is going to start you on a clean slate with a whole lot of other people. And then you'll just, get rid of all the people in this lifetime that you didn't like. This is the real beautiful thing for me about Buddhist ideas, that I don't take them as theology. I don't take them as sort of, truths like scientific truth. I take them as the kind of language of symbol and image that stretches my imagination, stretches my mindfulness to a capacity of greater compassion. So if I think about just, I only have this lifetime in an existential 20th century Western way. I just have this lifetime and it's decaying. I'm getting old. I'm getting weaker. It becomes in itself almost dystopian, almost despairing to feel that. Because it's like feeling I'm in this room, this trap, and I've no way out. And the consequences of that on my mental stability can be really damaging. However, if I use a concept within Buddhist tradition like reincarnation, and if I understand that concept to mean that there is infinite possibility to return again and again in embodied form in order to purify your compassion and to become utterly clean in your compassion for all the beings around you. In other words, to reach enlightenment. If you really stretch yourself to that mentally, it gives you a great sense of positivity and hope in the moment of the here and now where we're living. And if I feel that even somebody has passed away that I had an argument with or that I never resolved, I never made peace with them. Well, if I'm thinking in terms of reincarnation, which is not about personalities, it's not about, you'll hear nonsense talked about like, I think I was a princess in a former life. It's not really anything to do with that surface level of literalism. Reincarnation is faith, if you like. It is another expression, a poetic expression of faith. That I will always be and always returning karmically as a consequence of my negative or positive actions. So it's like I'm in the room, trapped in the room. Well, not exactly. I'm in the room until I cleanse myself, until I find joy. The one thing that there is no choice about in the Buddhist universe is there's no choice but to find joy. You will find joy. You will find bliss. It's already inside you. The Buddha that you will become eventually is already manifest deep inside you in the heart, in the space that you may not even be aware of, but you are already the Buddha, the enlightened one. It is the Buddha in you that is leading you, guiding you. And so your sense of reincarnation is a sense of stretching your mind to live more compassionately and joyfully in this present moment. I am an old man, not there yet, but I'm getting there. I'm 69. I'm coming towards the threshold. And I feel as young as I was when I was 21 or 16. And I feel that people that I have hurt or wounded in this life, who ended up as, enemies and passed away, well, I believe that in some future life we will meet again and we will have more opportunity to be loving, to be compassionate, and to turn enemy into friend. Everything will end up in friendship. Everything will end up in love. There's no other space, no matter how long the journey. And there's another thing that they say in Buddhism, and that is that we are here from beginningless time. That this, in the eternity of being which is outside time, we are eternally becoming in this journey towards love. So there's no moment at which, our sense of being was created and began. And that used to be a kind of a difficult idea for people in the West to grasp. To some, it used to seem absurd if you heard a Buddhist talking about the idea that, we were here reincarnating from beginningless time, like that this kind of embodiment of being in a cosmic universe was just endless. We used to think that's odd. But just look at what quantum physics has come up with in Western culture now. And as you know well, I know absolutely feck all about science, never mind quantum physics. But as the amateur outside like yourself, who listens to things on the radio and the television and reads a couple of books about it, you can see that the quantum physicists are touching ideas that are extraordinarily big compared to the little universe idea that we once had. The size of the universe, the possibility that there are multi-universes. There's all sorts of ideas now that kind of are closer to Buddhist thought, that kind of are bigger parameters than the ones we used to be using in our little kind of anthrocentric or ethnocentric Western cultural historical moment in Europe. And that's where Buddhists talk about, do you know the way they talk about, I have to find it in the text here, all mother beings. You'll hear it in the text, and I'll read the text again in a few minutes, but you'll often hear them talking in Tibetan Buddhism about all mother beings. What's that about? May I give all my compassion in gratitude to my mother beings. And that's linked into the idea of reincarnation, that there is this endless returning, endless embodiment of being, manifesting as who we are. And sometimes somebody who is not a friend in this life, an enemy, was a friend in a previous life. And if you think that beginningless time is a way of saying there is no end to the amount of reincarnations you have already experienced, then there must almost mathematically have been one incarnation where the person who is now your enemy was your mother. This is really wild stuff now. The level of the Buddhist imagination is really, really enormous, and they stretch the concepts so beautifully. And remember, they do it not to create a kind of a proof of reality or some sort of substantialism that they're talking about physics. It is to stretch the mind so the mind can kind of absorb the mystery of being here now. So let me go on just a little bit more about the mother being. But the mother being is like that every single sentient being, if the universe is infinite, time-wise, if the amount of reincarnations and the continuum of time goes back into the past, beginninglessness, with no beginning, well, that means that there had to be a combination where every sentient being, not just humans and not just your enemies, but absolutely every sentient being was your mother. The bird on the tree outside my window was once like a mother mothering me from birth. Now, can you see, if you get inside that little idea, put it on like a suit, put on the idea like a suit so that you get inside the idea. Don't ask yourself, is it right or wrong or true or false? Just try and use the idea like if you were in a gym, you might use, the machines, the weights, or the bicycle or the treadmill. You'd get up on the treadmill and you'd use it to stretch the muscle. Well, use the idea of beginningless time. Use the idea of karmic reincarnation, endlessly bringing you into embodiment, endlessly coming and coming, always in order to let go of more negative karma, so that you will finally realize the complete Buddha mind and Buddha compassion that is actually driving you. That is actually like the center of your being is compassion. It's just a question of getting rid of the negative emotions, the disturbing emotions, getting rid of them like, you would lose weight in a gym. And just as in a gym you would use machines then to stretch the body so that you'd lose the weight. So imagine in Buddhism that you're absorbing these really crazy ideas that I'm sharing with you, and very often reluctant to share with you because I'm not a teacher. I'm not a teacher of Buddhism. Again, I'm sharing my story that I practice these things. This is how I use these little ideas. And I'm telling you the story of my life, which is very often a story of happiness and joy when I use these things. When I pray in this way, it makes me feel better. So use these ideas like beginningless time, that imagine time is endless, going backwards, that it never had a beginning. It's infinite. And imagine that in that there is a constant recurring of you as being, finding embodiment. And that the kind of push or force forward of that is the complete compassion that is within you. The Buddha who is within you is constantly seeking to lose weight, to let go of all the kind of negativity or the ways of seeing yourself as the important thing in the universe. Just let go of everything. Just be here now. Allow your being to awake. And every reincarnation gets it stronger and stronger, and gradually you awaken. So you use that idea, and then your notion of compassion to the enemy has a bigger space within which to breathe. You begin to feel a compassion that is like saying, okay, I have an enemy in this life, there's nothing in this life would rationally make that person my friend. But wait a minute. In the infinity of the universe and the infinity of recurring manifestations, reincarnations, that person was once not just my friend, my mother. Now imagine the difference in your relationship to the little bird outside the window. If you could think of that relationship as being with a mother. I could stand outside in the garden and look at the bird and say, I feel grateful to you for my being. I feel grateful to you for my being. And if you were to stand outside and have that relationship with a bird, doesn't that really make you feel well balanced? Doesn't it feel like the most sensible thing we might do in the modern world when we talk about the environment and talk about loving the environment and caring for the environment? And how do we find motivation for it? Well, imagine if there was, a philosophy that contained templates of compassion, templates, ideas that stretched the mind to the point where you could actually walk into the garden and feel that every single sentient being was like a mother. At some stage, in the eternity of the universe, at some stage, every being was a mother loving you. And that idea, is always in my heart when I'm talking about, the motherliness of the world around you. You'll often hear me in podcasts talking about how to walk in the trees, to walk among nature, to walk anywhere, is to feel mothered. It's to feel that the kind of cosmos around you that has brought you to birth and brought you to consciousness is a mother. Well, that whole sense of reincarnation from beginningless time, that there is no end to the way that we have been constantly returning and incarnating in time in order to reach an awakening of the most consistent and deepest ground of our being, which is compassion, which is to say that the electrons are not neutral. The cosmos is not neutral. The cosmos is a balance, a pulse, a frequency of being, a manifestation of being that manifests in love. And that all the darkness, all the negativity is just dross that needs to be cleansed and cleaned away. Like somebody who's overweight loses weight. And then think about this prayer, this recitation of words that brings you into that zone of completely non-violent compassion. So the prayer kind of brings you through a meditation of how to react to people who annoy you, people who disturb you, people who hurt you. It's a wish. And I suppose that's an interesting word, wish. It may be even that wish is it's sometimes synonymous with what we in the Western culture call prayer. It's a word that they use in Tibetan Buddhism, a wish. So let me make this wish again. With a determination to accomplish the highest welfare of all sentient beings who surpass even a wish-granting jewel, I will learn to hold them supremely clear. So all sentient beings surpass even a wish-granting jewel. A wish-granting jewel would be a kind of a poetic way of saying, imagine there is some beautiful jewel that would grant you every wish, that would realize every prayer. Imagine there was such a thing, a wish-granting jewel. Well, there is. The next person you meet is a wish-granting jewel. The next person you meet is like not somebody to whom you must be compassionate. No, the next person you meet is a wish-granting jewel. They are an opportunity. Their embodiment in the world is a jewel that will help you achieve enlightenment. So with the determination to accomplish the highest welfare of all sentient beings, you're on a road now to find not your own Buddhahood. You're on a road to bring your Buddhahood immeasurably to every single sentient being that exists. With the determination to accomplish the highest welfare for all sentient beings who surpass even a wish-granting jewel, I will learn to hold them supremely clear. Now, when you hold somebody like with the context, with the perception of enemy, you're not really seeing them. You're not seeing them clearly. You're not seeing that they are the Buddha. They are enlightened. They are completely enlightened and embodying compassion. It's just that the karma between you has fractured your vision. You can't see this Buddha being because the incarnational presence in front of you clashes with your karma or whatever. So when you start to say, I will hold them supremely clear, you're saying, I will transcend all my own narrow perceptions of them being an enemy. I will recognize them as the Buddha. With a determination to accomplish the highest welfare for all sentient beings, or of all sentient beings, who surpass even a wish-granting jewel, I will learn to hold them supremely clear. You can see how huge some Buddhist ideas are, how complex they are. And you can carry the whole web of perception in a prayer. It's the wonderful thing that, and this happens in Christianity as well as in Buddhism, that prayers very often carry the theology. They carry the philosophy. And you're embodying the theological disposition or the philosophical disposition by actually saying it. And this particular prayer that I've started to work on now, and I'm going to work on it again, and I have only got 4 lines into the first verse. It is that absolutely huge. The prayer, the credit is given to a Lama called Langri Tangpa, and that's, the spelling is Langri Tangpa, Langri Tangpa. So if you Googled him, or a better way is to Google the very first line. If you Google the first line, then the whole prayer will come up. And you'll identify that it's the right prayer because you'll have heard me recite it. And in this podcast, we're at verse 1, so this is the first of the series, and I'll try and go through the prayer, but it's just too big to actually contain into one podcast. The ideas in it, simple enough to summarize. One is like consider beginningless time. Consider not true or false, but wear the idea, or let the idea wear you. You know, bring the idea into your imagination, into your mind, and just think for today that everything that is here, that in some sense is a repeating, a recurring, a pulse that is going on eternally, that it never ends. And there was no beginning to this beautiful pulse of reality, which is twofold: one, underlying ground of being, and surface level manifestation of reality. So that what we see on the surface has a depth beneath the visible. In the emptiness there is a being in all things that holds it in existence. Imagine this never had a beginning. And then imagine that all the people who are either in one of three categories, either your friend, your enemy, or your stranger. You either know a person as a friend, you either dislike them, or they're a stranger. That all these people have been around you from beginningless time, and there's no limit, no end to the permutations and combinations with which you have related to this being eternally and will continue to do so eternally. There's no getting away from anyone. That means that at some stage your friend was your enemy. At some stage all the people that you might think of as enemies were more than your friends, they were your mother. You were born out of the compassion of other beings. And if we have endlessly been repeating this in our manifestations and incarnations, then every single being was at some stage your mother. It's an extraordinary thought. If you leave it on the page like an intellectual idea, you'll never find the richness in it. But if you kind of use it like you'd use something in the gym, like a machine, to stretch your perception, to kind of open your heart in the present moment, then you'll begin to see the power of all Buddhist philosophy. So to end, I will recite this first verse of the prayer, the wish, once more, and see how you get on with it for the day or the week, whatever. Here it goes. With a determination to accomplish the highest welfare of all sentient beings, who surpass even a wish-granting jewel, I will learn to hold them supremely clear. When I listen to the background sound, it's the voice of His Holiness the Dalai Lama broadcasting live to the public from his retreat in India, and you can see how powerful the phrase is, "Thank you for being here." I hear his voice and I say, "Thank you for being here." This great manifestation of compassion, embodiment within His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And I say, "Thank you for being here." And then I think of you listening. And you can see that there's a different depth to the phrase that I use every week. Thank you for being here. Because within the context of the great journey towards enlightenment, the great journey towards compassion, the great journey that is like losing weight in your psyche, letting go of all your negative karma so that you can be fully alive, fully compassionate. and imagining that you were once my mother, that you were here endlessly returning. No beginning to the amount of reincarnations you've already had, and no end to it, until we all together reach the state of bliss and love. And now I think of you as a wishing jewel. Now I think of you as actually an object in my world in this present moment, who is helping me transform into Buddha light. And there is the powerful context. It's not sentimental when I say the phrase, thank you for being here. It has a context behind it, a powerful depth of Buddhist insight. Thank you for being here. You are a gift to me, to the people around you, to the people who are your family or your neighbours, even to the people who dislike you. You are a gift to them. An extraordinary, powerful presence of Buddhahood. Thank you for being here. Bye-bye.